what I would do is, remember, we are using the report, the longest one, final draft with or without removal of depreciation. Let's make sure everything is checked if we want the images to be exported on our report. So this is the report we're going to save to our computer. We're going to click export right here, export PDF file. Okay, so we'll go in here, we'll get into our estimate reports folder. We can give it a name. That's what I typically will do with this report. Like I'll go after, I'll usually name it last name and then first name. So like last name dash first name is how I usually name my estimates, but I name this one Bailey 3-tab just for, so an example name. But then I'll just go ahead and write in Xactimate estimate so that everybody knows this is the file you want, right? But then I will also export a few other reports that I find useful. So these are typically the reports that I'm using most of the time that I'll export for every single file. And I usually do 7 total reports, and I will do this report here. So this is the Xactimate estimate, and then I'll go up and do the components report, but I'll take the images off because I don't feel like we need the images in the components report. But the components report, just so you know, it looks like this. It looks very similar, but it's a smaller report. And if you've never seen, it kind of creates sort of a shopping list and what these items per like the materials, what they should cost per component. And then you go down and it has the material components followed by the equipment components. So equipment you may need and what that should run you about if you had to rent it. And then labor components, like these are contractor rates, if you had to sub out like at retail rates for each and every one of these, which you shouldn't have to do. And then it also has the sketch at the end. And so that's your components report. So what I'll do is I will export the components report, and I'll just sort of change the end and then save it right there like that. And then I'll export the scope report, and the scope report looks like this. And this is key. This is like something you can give to your subs or your crew leader or somebody that you didn't really want to know what was approved or what you're getting paid on the job. Sometimes it's useful to give to the client. Like, yeah, I've got the estimate done, and this is what I've come up with. This is about accurate to you. Like, they're not seeing the sticker shock of the prices from it, but they can clearly see that all these scope items are in line. Sometimes this might be a good strategy to give just the scope report to the adjuster. Like, look, let's agree on the scope first because the prices are irrelevant. We use the same prices, correct? So this is the scope report. Has a lot of good uses for it, but it's not going to give any dollar figures whatsoever. So for that reason, I also include that amongst all the reports that I export. And I'll just, again, on this one, I'll just go and change the end there and click Save. And then I'll get out of these reports here, and I'll go up to the top tab to this, say I'm in the estimate reports now. I'll go over to administrative reports, and I like to use this additional work authorization form. And you can give it any name you want. I'll typically give it last name, first name, and then I'll type out additional work authorization. But for this purpose, I'm just going to save it. But let me show it to you also. It looks like this right here, and see, it's a change order form, right? So it has a lot of uses on the construction job site, and it's already populated with the client information, the contractor information here, and then it also has the property owner info populated into here. So, I find that useful. Like, look, this is something that's not insurance related. This is something that we have to do. You're agreeing to it. It's going to cost this much, and let's all have an understanding before we even do this item. So that's a good report to have on hand for any job, right? So for that reason, I also export that. Already did. All right, certificate of completion is another one that I'll use. And that one also is populated with the client information here and with the contractor information here. And this is a good thing to get on every single job to show that the client says that all work has been completed as per the insurance scope, right? I mean, it doesn't say per scope, but that's the understanding. When I have gone to invoice on jobs, the final invoice, and you've probably gone through this, where you're trying to get the final depreciation released, a lot of times the insurance company will ask you, do you have the COC? Do you have the certificate of completion? And then if you don't, then they have to go through the trouble of calling the client to ask them, hey, has all the work been completed and all of that? And then what if they don't get a hold of them? And what if the client doesn't recognize the number coming through and they have to leave a message and blah, 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 right? Hey, did the insurance company ever call you? I don't know. I didn't check my voicemail. So anyway, you can just kind of cut through all that nonsense by simply having one of these forms on hand. When you get to the end, have the client sign off on it and simply send it into the insurance company. So for that reason, I also include this report amongst all the reports that I will export. Again, I would name it last name, first name, and then type out certificate of completion and then click save. But here we'll just go with the abbreviated version that it already went with, click save, and then one final report out of this section anyway, is the final punch list, export. Let's take a look at it. Let's save it, but let's take a look at it. Final punch list looks like this. So like, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, like let's do a final walkthrough and let's look at the whole job. And if we come up with any areas that you find that still need some attention, any like, blemishes and things, or the paint didn't match, needs, something like that. Anything that wasn't quite handled correctly, a piece of the fascia's bent up or whatever it is, a drip edge or something, let's write those down during that walkthrough and let's both agree on it and sign this. And then we'll go through and make sure we get those items done as agreed to on this final punch list. Okay, it's a standard form in the construction industry. And so for that reason, I also include this form amongst all the reports that I export. Okay, so I just saved that already. Let's double check. They're all there, right? All 6 reports are there. I have one final report, which I'm gonna find going back into my control panel. And by the way, we were showing Xactimate in the beginning, and I told you that your recent projects will pop up in this area, and that it wasn't because I had test in here. Well, now I have Bailey in here, so it's just showing that one. But that's what it'll look like. It'll show all of your projects with a little bit of a preview of them there, right? And so, but what I'm looking for is this data transfer over on the right-hand side. Left click on the data transfer, and what it's gonna do, it's gonna give me an option of retrieving or sending. Okay, so you might be wanting to retrieve a file from your desktop, and these are called, these types of files that we're going to be working with here are called Esx files. You see, they look kind of weird when they show up in a list of files. The icon for them looks a little weird. They have sort of like a squiggly line in it, but it ends with the extension of .esx, and these are Xactimate data files. You can send these data files to an adjuster, for example, and he could retrieve it from you. Like you could send it to him via email, and he could save that to his desktop, and he could retrieve it from the desktop and import it into his Xactimate and open it up as a project and start making changes to it. Like he could put his letterhead on your estimate and make it look like his own work and get it approved. So I mean, there's a lot of, you could save him a lot of work. There's a lot of value from that. So you really need to be learning on how to do these data transfers. Now, another reason to do it is because I've included a lot of Esx files inside of the training course in the document section. And so if you want to learn how to get those out of there, you want to do this right here, right? And so I would now, by the way, if you're going to retrieve that and you go and you retrieve it in there from your desktop by using this here, then you may not see it pop up in your projects. You would have to take this and make sure it's selected on whatever profile that came in, right? And so there's an option for, if you do it through the, so for example, if you do it through the projects tab, over here, if it just says show current user, which by the way is the default setting, you won't see that file. And you'll be like, man, I don't know how, I don't know why I'm not being able to pull that up. It's not working for me. It shows that the retrieval was successful, but I don't see it in the list of all my projects. So you need to change that to show all, and then you'll find it. That's a very common problem that I get a lot, right? And so back to what we were doing here, we're gonna do a data transfer, and we're gonna send this file from Xactimate into our computer, okay? And now that I've done that, I'm gonna select the item, and I typed in Bailey to come up with this. And you didn't see it before because it showed all my projects, so I cut it out. But I typed in Bailey and then highlight it and then just simply click send. and give it a second, and it will give you a notification if it was successful. And like, see, it's taken a little bit of time because of all those images. So it might make you think it's not working because it took 12 seconds, right? But it succeeded. And so now, if I go into that folder, I can see that all 7 reports are there. There's the additional work authorization. There's the Esx file. Remember I told you the little squiggly lines? It looks a little weird, but it's .esx. So like if I want to just go and open this right now and double click it, it won't open, right? And if you sent that to somebody that doesn't have Xactimate, it's pretty much worthless. But so if you're trying to do that and wondering why it won't open, it's not the file, it's not corrupt or anything. You have to go through that data transfer process to be able to open it. Okay, so there's the Xactimate estimate, components, scope report, certificate of completion, final punch list. Let's just look. I mean, so now we have a PDF report of our estimate that looks like this. Scale it down to 100%. And you can see we now have a completed estimate that quite frankly is a work of art. It is accurate, it's detailed, it's thorough, it's diligent. I mean, you know, half the battle is finding damage that wasn't already discovered before. So you did that before you ever even got to this point. But now you've got everything's backed up by building codes. It's backed up by images and documentation, hardcore of the roof, you know, drones. I mean, you've got detailed footnotes, italics, you've bolded the items that haven't been approved already. And my friends, what you have right here is an estimate that is ready to fly to the insurance company. And I hope that you've gotten some real serious value out of this quite extensive and long training lesson on how to build a damage estimate. And we'll do more estimates. We'll keep on doing more, you know, different types of estimates in different scenarios. But I think you'll see that this will cover your basic framework, your basic structure. You've learned how to, you know, you've had an intro to Xactimate and Sketch. You've learned how to integrate building codes and photos into the estimate. You've learned how to structure the estimate properly. You've learned how to add footnotes and F9 information and opening statements. We'll cover more of the opening statement later. But you've also learned how to export and save your files. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you so very much for your attention, and use this information so that you can win more.